Join the community-shaping craft spirits, membership that meets you where you are and grows with you. Visit distilling.com and become part of the movement today.
We all get to share a space, see all of the vendors, all the people who really bring the product to life. It's really special to just be in a space where we get to gather together from all over the country.
I'd now like to announce this year's winner of the ADI Distillery of the Year Award.
Their conferences, their classes that they give, they're great if you're really serious about learning how to do something correct.
Signature Serve Invitational, which is a cocktail competition that we put together to pair craft distillers with some of the best bartenders.
Awesome, and their cocktail is awesome. Go Leo! Woohoo!
Hey, good day, everybody, depending on where you are in a time zone. Thank you for joining ADI for this webinar with Joshua Bierman from Punch Company, focusing on shelf presence. Thank you all for coming. Hope you caught that video. We're excited to be in Miami this year. August 18th and 19th will be our annual conference and expo, so it's going to be a great show. We're working really hard to make this one that's going to be memorable. Will Miami be hot in August? Yes. Lived down there for a summer. I'm not going to lie. It'll be hot in August. The good thing is that we've got a show floor that's going to be fully AC'd. So you're going to be all day inside. You don't have an excuse. The heat is not an excuse to come down to the show. We'll be releasing hotel information here shortly. All of our hotels are going to be under $210 a night. So we fight really hard to keep that affordable for you. And we're really excited and hope you all will join us down there in Miami on August 18th and 19th. If you're a member, thank you for being a member. If you're not a member, you can click that link right there at the bottom of the screen. Get more information on becoming a member. We do have a new free membership for distilleries and non-distilling producers. If you want to just test the waters of ADI, you're more than welcome to use that. You still get a discount to the conference, a discount to our annual spirits competition that we just finished up in March. And it's a great way to kind of come see what the ADI community is about. The premium membership, however, is way more bang for your buck. So $350 a year. You get 4 issues of our Distiller magazine throughout the year. And on top of the normal discount, you also get a $150 credit that you can use on anything ADI. If you want to enter more spirits in the spirits competition, you can use it for that. You can use it to attend our blending workshop with Nancy Fraley in December that we do at Iron Root in Denison, Texas. You can use it for conference passes as well. So just a little bit more information on that. You know, if you're not a member, please consider becoming a member. Your support helps us do webinars like this and get some great suppliers and thought leaders in the industry on these webinars. So with that little run of show, if you've got a question during the webinar, you've got a little chat button with the Q&A. Go ahead and drop your questions in that Q&A, and I will cover them with Joshua at the end of the webinar. And we'll go through all those and make sure they all get answered from you. I know he's got a lot to cover, so he's got some case studies and everything. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Joshua Bierman on to tell us a little bit more about himself and get the show started.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for the great introduction. My name is Joshua Bierman. I run Punch Design Co. We're a creative agency that specializes in food and beverage. I'm going to actually go ahead and share my screen first thing. Y'all ready? Today is shelf presence, building a brand that connects with the consumer. Like I said, I run Punch Design Co. We do a lot of food and beverage branding. That's basically our focus. I recognize that we have, an hour, 15 minutes set aside. However, I'm going to try to get through my part of the presentation as efficiently as possible. I know you guys have things to do. If we don't use all hour and 15 minutes, that's entirely fine with me. And I want to make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So I'm not going to stop and read every word on every slide. After we're done, this will be available as a video, and I can even send these things as PDFs after the fact. So you can get a case study, you can get this presentation that we're going to walk through. So don't try to read every single word on the screen. Punch is one of 3 creative teams. That's the food and beverage focused one. Basically, it's a decentralized agency, which means that I don't have any full-time employees. I have a network of specialists, and we'll talk about all that stuff later. All you need to know now is that I've been working in food and beverage for about 14 years, and 10 years of that has been running this Punch Design Co. team. So don't worry about looking at every single word on the screen. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this thing. So the description is building a brand that connects with the consumer. Basically, that is another way of describing something that we call brand development. I'm about to say a lot of specific words that half of you guys might have heard before, half of you might have never heard before. I'm going to do my best to walk through each of them and give you a big picture. Whenever we talk about building a consumer brand or a brand that resonates with the consumer, we're talking about doing a lot of little things all in the same direction. So you'll see on your screen where it says the art of getting all of this in sync. Well, what is all of this? What are all of these moving parts? Well, all of our brand assets or brand development, all these aspects of our brand, they tend to fall in one of 3 buckets. We have our core brand assets, and this is what most people think of when they think of branding. Your company name or your product names. You think of logos, colors, and visual style. That's kind of the nuts and bolts that people think of. And that's an important part. But it also includes the tone of voice of the brand and the personality. How does it actually feel to a customer? Is it really casual? Is it really formal? Is it really fancy? Is it really friendly? These are aspects of the brand that are communicated not just with visual style, but with words and video, things like that. We have the story itself. What maybe that is an origin story about the company, or maybe that is a story about the product and where it tends to be experienced. That's part of sense of place. Where does this product tend to be purchased, and where does it tend to be enjoyed? Is it the type of thing that you enjoy by yourself, with a small group, at a large party? Is it an essential part of a particular social ritual? All of that is part of this core brand assets column here. We also have value proposition. Value proposition is not just bang for the buck. It is, what am I actually getting for this? Am I getting something that is a really cool piece to sit on my mantle or part of my collection? Is it really excellent value for the money? Is it a company that only does one thing and really does it well? Is it a company that offers me variety? Does it mean that I am a part of a sort of a special club or a special community whenever I participate in this brand? All of these things are part of just one of these 3 columns. You can see how obviously we want all of these aspects of your brand to operate in sync, but they still have to operate in sync with these others as well. So our shelf presence is basically what you're going to experience whenever you're in a retail environment. And that could be in a physical store, on a physical shelf, or it could be on a digital shelf. It could be even on social media. So we're talking about the packaging. We're talking about labels, glassware, caps, enclosures, the illustrations that you use, the photography that might go on there, design elements, anything that can be seen or touched is going to be part of that shelf presence. So we want all of these moving parts to also be pushing in the same direction as the story we're telling with these core brand assets. And then we have the brand, what I call brand expression. And this is basically the stuff that you use to go to market. It could be the really mundane stuff like sell sheets, but it also is your actual advertising, your social media presence, videos that you make, photos that you shoot, the partnerships that you choose to have, whether it's a nonprofit that you're sponsoring. We'll look at an example of that here in a little bit. It could be some other food or beverage product. It could be a restaurant. It could be whatever. The retail locations, your point of purchase experience, whether that is something that you have a lot of control over, might vary, based on a retailer, based on your state, but offering interesting point of purchase experiences, and then merchandise. So, we've talked before about we haven't talked before, but I speak a lot with people about using kind of minor league baseball as an example. Merchandise represents an enormous percentage of revenue for minor league teams. Even if you only buy a ticket a year or less, a lot of people will buy a lot of merchandise because it just looks really interesting and really fun, but it also is sort of a regional or local pride sort of thing. And so that could be part of the value proposition, that this is a regional or local pride brand that story is being communicated through merchandise. So that's just one example of how you can tell this story through all of these different aspects. So whenever you hear people talking about connecting with the consumer, or they talk about brand development, or you talk any of those words that are in that sphere, they're really all pointing at the same thing, which is getting all of these moving parts headed in the same direction. We might use the phrase a long walk in one direction is what we're really trying to do. So I know I'm speaking pretty quickly, but it's because I'm trying to get through this pretty efficiently so we can give you guys plenty of time. So attending this seminar, I don't know how many people are here now, but my guess is that if you're attending, you fall into one of two groups. You fall into this first group I described that might have never heard many or most of the words that I just used, or really thought about what they mean. You're probably wondering why we care about this stuff at all. Why does brand development matter? Why is it important that all of my small moving parts all are telling the same story and taking a long walk in the same direction? That's group one. Group two, you are probably familiar with a lot of the language that I just used, and you're already on board. You already recognize why this is important, but you want to get to the nuts and bolts. How do I do this? What does this process look like? And how much does it cost? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to group two first, and then talk to group one after that. And what my guess is that by looking at some of this process and seeing how this process works, the benefit that it provides, that's probably going to answer most of group one's questions. So let's look at a little bit of a case study. We're going to look at two different ones today. We're going to spend most of our time with Bibco, which is for Bearded Iris Brewing Company, not a spirits company. We're going to look at this because I want to show you how to think about it without getting bogged down in necessarily spirit-specific stuff, how we're talking about solving this problem on a sort of a, bird's eye view. And you can look at how the process works step by step. And then we'll take a look at a distillery project that I just completed to just show another example of that. So let's hop over to this Bearded Iris case study. This is an example of a PDF that we can send out after the fact so you can look at every single little word that's on it. We're not going to read everything. At the beginning of a brand strategy or brand development process, what we're really trying to do is get to something called brand vision. You can see it in this gray square right here. Brand vision is basically a shared vision for that story, for that direction that you're trying to head. You want to get every little piece of your brand heading in the same direction. Well, I want a vision for that. I want some type of North Star. I want it to be really clear. That is built of three components. We've got brand strategy, which would be a simple phrase. Whether that phrase ever is uttered to the customer or not is not really important. The important part is that it is something like an internal mantra that we use as a North Star whenever we're trying to make these creative decisions. You can think of it as the answer to the question, why? If you're familiar with the marketing language, start with why. Why does this product, why does this brand even exist? Why would somebody bother to choose it over any one of the other hundreds or thousands of options available to them? It's the reason for being. Creative direction on the other side is how that gets executed and how that gets communicated to the customer. So we have the answer to the question why, the answer to the question how, and that includes things like style. It includes tone of voice. It includes some of the stuff that we talked about in the previous slide. In the middle, we have a soul concept, which is the bridge to the two. It's the answer to the question what. What are we attempting to communicate to the customer? And that usually takes the form of a lot of watchwords. So let's make this a little bit concrete. For Bearded Iris Brewing Company, they showed up with, they'd been in the market for a few years, and they showed up with a few existing brand assets that weren't really cutting it. sales weren't quite what they wanted it to be. They had some pretty aggressive ambitions for growth, and they knew that what they had wasn't really going to cut it, and it wasn't actually communicating what they thought was really important about their brand. So what you see on your screen is a screenshot of some actual meetings with them. We developed this core brand strategy statement of less is way, way more. You're familiar with this idea of less is more, but that became our brand strategy statement, or our mantra, or our North Star that we used whenever we were thinking of any other creative decision, any of these decisions about the brand. We want to keep that in the front of our minds. But that's not quite enough. We need a little bit more to build a full brand around. And so we move on to our sole concept. Some of the words on the screen might be small for you. That's fine. The point is that you're just seeing how the process works. And in our case, the group of watchwords that we came up with for our sole concept include ideas like rarity, style, and thoughtfulness. Fun first. We wanted to be an antidote to snobbery. Cultivate variety, understated opulence. That idea of understated, it really is, ladders back up to this idea of less is more with the brand. Restraint and subtlety, same idea. Intellectual, curious, progressive, swagger for days, rich. We've got to figure out a way to communicate this idea of like really rich, this sort of sophisticated take on these recipes without being over the top, because less is more. So then how do we execute that on the creative level? You could, for that third pillar, right? We talked about our creative direction. Maybe this is a brand that could look young, or it could look old. It could look fancy, or it could look cheap. All of these things are still available within the brand strategy that we talked about. So we've got to establish a creative direction that can be really consistent over time. So let's take a look here. We've got, I'm sorry, I went back. That's why that was confusing. Okay, so then we move on to the actual creative execution. You're seeing a lot of behind the scenes stuff here that typically, is only shown by the client. This was done a few years ago, but you can see how the creative design and concepting evolved until we eventually arrived at some designs that were very understated. We've got our less is more, but they still have a lot of what they would call swagger about it. It looks very thoughtful, looks very intentionally done. And by the end, we were able to execute this. So this is just one screen of a whole suite of brand materials. At the time, there's a product called Homestyle that was already picking up a little bit more traction than the rest of theirs. So we wanted to throw a lot of weight behind this product, Homestyle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull up some of these ads that we're doing for them right now and show you how all of these moving parts come together. So we talked about all of these moving parts pulling in the same direction. What you are seeing right here are basically, designs for truck wraps. You're going to see normal big delivery trucks with these ads on the side. On this one slide, you can see 3 or 4, maybe 5 different aspects of all of the brand that is all pulling in the same direction. So from the beginning, the idea of Homestyle as a product by Bearded Iris being a Tennessee product has been baked in. This phrase, made in Tennessee for Tennessee, is a tagline that we've used for quite a while. The product name, Homestyle, immediately connects with this idea of sense of place, of home state. We use the word Tennessee all of the time. It's baked into the product name. They have a partnership with 1% for the Planet. The most of that goes to 10 Green, which is a nonprofit that's specifically about helping the state of Tennessee, which is another connection telling the same story. And then on these ads, we have all of these images of various beautiful locations in Tennessee. I mean, these are just gorgeous shots. And you wouldn't necessarily think, I'm going to show a bunch of outdoor imagery for a craft beer brand necessarily. But in this case, it's a natural fit because of the partnership, because of the name Homestyle, because of the connection with the brand made in Tennessee for Tennessee. Every Homestyle helps keep Tennessee green. And then on the back of the truck right here, drink Homestyle and help conserve our home state. That's 4 or 5 aspects of the brand right there that are all reinforcing the same story. So this is a project for the brand and for the homestyle product that we did several years ago. And they have, like I said, taken a long walk in one direction, and now homestyle is the #1 selling craft beer in the state of Tennessee. And this is because they've dedicated themselves to this consistent vision. We go back to the presentation here. This phrase, the art of getting all of this in sync, you can see just on those truck wraps how they have all of these moving parts that are directly in sync. So whenever somebody encounters anything about homestyle, it's going to be that specific story that's consistent over time. Part of that is being aesthetically consistent. With this particular product, there's a brand rule where the word homestyle is always gold on a black background. And that sounds pretty picky, but you'll never see it reproduced black on white, white on black, any other way. It is always only ever gold on black. So you have that memorability from that consistency that's baked in over time. Okay, so that is, let me see if there's anything else in this case study. I think that's it. Yeah, I can send this over and you can see a lot more cool Bearded Iris stuff on the website, or just look up Bearded Iris. They just crush it. One of the things that's really fun about working with them is that they, as a client, they also just happen to have really excellent taste. And so that makes it really fun to kick around stuff with them. Not every client does, but even those who don't have excellent personal taste, really good ones are able to figure out, all right, this is a way that I need to be consistent. This is a way that I can tell the same story again and again and again and again across all of these various moving parts. Okay, that's enough about Bearded Iris. Let's look at some distillery stuff. So here is Stillworks, Texas. This is a new distillery outside of Austin. Now, the story that we wanted to tell with them is this is a family-owned distillery and that this is in the Texas Hill Country. So we wanted to have an aspect of that local quality that's communicated across every product, and we settled on the sky. So this idea of having a really big sky is something that is pretty important to that customer base. So we did a special illustration of what looks like a small family-owned farm, the pecan tree in the front. That's really regionally important. But the vast majority of the product label is the sky. And you can see this actually wraps all the way around the product. It wraps around the left. And you can see the sky and the actual scene continue around the edge. And with every different variety, the sky changes color. It's a different time of day or a different season. We have a more golden, more orange, more reddish, and even this sort of purplish, dusky sky, which is really cool. And then as the brand continues to expand and we do more series, you'll have different approaches. So we'll have a different series in the future where it's going to be a nighttime sky for these more high-end releases where you'll have constellations, or you might have the moon and different phases, things like that. But it's the same story, just variations on that. Now, we talked about how having the name, whether it's a product or the distillery name, reinforce this brand story we're talking about. We've done a bunch of really cool stuff with this. I'll pull up this little video of this signage that they're making. In this particular case, this group is actually going to have to change their name. We could talk about this more later, but it's pretty unfortunate. But it's really, really, really important to make sure that you have your name really locked down and aren't going to have to change it, so that we talk about taking that long walk in the same direction. Having the same name from jump is going to be pretty important too. This is an example of sort of a truncated version of a style guide, which we'll talk more about later. You can see a bunch of different brand assets that would be in that first column we talked about at the beginning. Okay, I'm going to go back to this presentation here. So we talked about the two buckets of people who are here. Group one wants to know why this is important. Group two wants to know, okay, how do we do it and how much? Well, that was a little bit of an overview of a case study. We could probably spend 2 or 3 hours going through every little detail of every page, but we won't do that today. I'm just going to give you an overview. But in terms of the how much of what this looks like, the question is, at first, what are you buying? Anything that's on this chart we just looked at, all these things that you've got to get in sync, everything that fits under brand vision, whether it's your core brand assets, whether it's your shelf presence, whether it's your brand expression, all of this stuff you can hire agencies to do. You can also do a fair bit of this in-house if you've got the right team in place. Sometimes have really excellent in-house talent. But even some groups that have talented in-house people have decided that they want to have some aspect of this, work with a creative professional who just focuses on that thing. Now, in terms of how much a process like we've described with all of these moving parts costs, there's quite a range, as you can expect. You can pay as much as you like for creative services, all the way down at the bottom. If you've got your cousin's son's buddy, will draw you a logo and deliver that for you. You can pay $35. You can pay $100 on Fiverr or something like that. And who knows, they might come up with something really killer. But the odds are pretty long that is going to contribute to this overall singular vision that you have for your brand. You're really going to want to try to find a partner who is helping you build that vision and make sure that every single moving part, all of these small jobs, are all pointing the same way. On the other end of the spectrum, there's a group like Stranger and Stranger. Some of you guys might be familiar with them. Stranger and Stranger is an international agency that specializes in beverage, and they're unbelievable. Their portfolio is just really killer. They're world class, right? And it's $20K just to get a meeting with them, or at least it was a few years ago. I don't know what the pricing is now, but to do a single SKU, you're looking at well over 6 figures. Now, they do unbelievable stuff. Not all of their clients are luxury brands. Some of their brands are more budget brands that they work with. But they're going to deliver every single thing that I talked about. But a lot of small organizations just don't have that in the budget. One notch below, you might go with a regional player. Kodo is just an example here. They do some really cool stuff. They do a lot of craft beer, but stuff in other spirits or other beverages as well. To do a suite, kind of like what we just looked at for Stillworks Texas, you're probably talking about, roughly $100K, give or take. And that might include some merch. It might include some social media stuff. It really just depends on what you need and what you want. This is my group here. One of the differences between us and some of these other guys, other than the price, is because I have a decentralized team or distributed team, which means no full-time employees, but I work with illustrators, graphic designers, copywriters, videographers, web developers, motion graphics people, you name it. So whatever we need for the brand, we'll activate the appropriate team members. And this keeps us from being something of a style shop. Some creative agencies they really focus on one style and they absolutely nail it. And if you want that style, you hire them. And that's great. You can have some really excellent work. I like doing a lot of different styles. And so what we try to do is figure out the most appropriate creative solution for a given client and for their customers, their market, and their budget. So if you look across our portfolio, you'll see stuff that doesn't look like the other stuff. Sometimes there's similarities, but we're trying to solve unique issues for each of these clients. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of pricing. Not every product and not every distillery is going to have the same set of needs. Some might be more narrow, some might be more broad. If you've got, a dozen products, that's different than a distillery that makes one product and literally nothing else. At a bare minimum, I would make sure that you're getting a style guide whenever you're working with a creative agency who's doing some core branding for you, whether they're doing actual product design or not. I would make sure that you are getting one of those. And I showed you an example of, and this is kind of just a sample of what a style guide might look like, with some rules, with some do's and don'ts, which are usually the most helpful part, but also how you want to use certain types of typography and color and things of that nature. Okay, so that was the second bucket, who wanted to know how and how much. The first bucket was the why. I know that we moved really quickly through these case studies, but my hope is that you, having seen all of the different implications or some different implications of the steps that we just walked through, you can start to see the benefit to a business and an operator and how that is going to allow them to present their brand to a customer in a way that is memorable over time, a way that is really imbued with meaning, and is really, really useful. So we talked about how, connecting with your customers It's this long walk in the same direction. If you are changing stuff up every 18 months, it's going to be pretty difficult to build memorability. But also, if you don't have a brand that looks like it was paid attention to, it's going to be really, really easy to overlook. So even though in many cases, spirits manufacturers are not the final retailer, you're still effectively direct to customer. It's not the retailer's job, it's not the distributor's job to do all of this work that I just described. You are providing those retailers with all of these things, and through your social media presence, through advertising, through merchandise, etc., you are imbuing this brand with meaning. That's not something you can count on your distributors to do, your retailers to do. You are direct to consumer in that sense. I used to say to potential customers that if you have more sales than you can fill, then I can't help you. Then, I'm not the guy for you. However, I don't actually think that's true, because the odds are if you've got more sales than you can fill, you should, one of your first things to think about would be raising prices. However, it's pretty common that even though the demand for your liquid might justify a higher price point, your brand or your shelf presence can't. If somebody is shopping for a product at a slightly higher price point, they're probably going to be expecting a certain degree of sophistication on the package itself. So this goes back a little bit to that shelf presence. I often use the metaphor of going shopping for, pasta sauce and at the grocery store. When you walk down the aisle of pasta sauce, you know which products are the most expensive before you ever see a number. You can tell based on the glass, the texture of the paper, the attention to detail, to various aspects. It is about setting expectation. If you are a product that is actually trying to present itself as a really excellent value or bang for the buck for just value to the customer, you're probably not going to use the same visual sophistication as somebody who is trying to position itself really expensively. We might talk about Tito's in a little bit. Tito's has a shelf presence that is very straightforward. It doesn't look like an afterthought, but it looks very plain, to put it frankly. And this is not bad. In fact, they're enormously successful. One of the things they're doing with their shelf presence is communicating this value. We do one thing, we do it really well. We are focused on this very specific vodka, and our label's not an afterthought, but it's not where we're putting all of our effort. They don't have a million different flavors. They just do this one thing. And if you looked at that label, you would probably think, yeah, I'll bet they do one thing. That is their focus. And so shelf presence doesn't immediately mean, oh, I'm trying to look incredibly opulent and sophisticated, or I'm trying to look X, Y, or Z. You're trying to tell that one story again and again and again and again. Tito's with their label, even though it is very simple, it is still very clear, and it is immediately communicating to the customer, we do this one thing, and you can expect really good value from that one thing. So they're telling one story over and over again. Additionally, here's the second thing: doing a visual update, brand update. It can also potentially open new retail opportunities. Whole Foods is a good example, where they probably get 1,000 new products. People want to sell them every single week. Within a given category, let's say there's 50. And within those 50 products, let's say they're relatively indistinguishable from a price standpoint, from a flavor standpoint, maybe from a nutritional benefit standpoint. They're all within spitting distance of each other. Whole Foods is going to pick the ones that they think are going to move based on how they look on the shelf. Now, it's not just expensive retailers. It can also be compelling to budget retailers, kind of in the, use that Tito's example. What we're trying to do is become more discoverable. We've got to look visually interesting, compelling on the shelf, and memorable, but then also set that right expectation. And we're not trying to set some sort of opulent expectation for a budget product and vice versa. So what we're trying to do is build a brand that has these three things. We're trying to build something that's memorable. We talked about how Homestyle is very memorable. Not only is the name itself memorable, but they only ever present it one way, gold on black. They tell it with the same story again and again and again and again, that imbues it with meaning over time and is now incredibly valuable, right? It's the #1 selling craft beer in Tennessee. So Man, I got through that actually more quickly than I expected to. I talked pretty fast.
Hey, I'm back. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me pull up some questions, y'all. If you have questions for Joshua, go ahead and put them in the chat. And here I've got one from our president, Eric Owens. What are some of the biggest errors or worst decisions you have seen that have been fatal to a brand?
Sure. So this dovetails with some of the other things that I know that you and I have talked about. So the biggest one is actually not really thinking about this at all. It's relatively common, especially smaller companies or companies that are just starting out. A lot of the decisions that people tend to think of as creative decisions, they will leave entirely up to preference. Like, I'm the owner and I like the color blue. And that might be as far as they go with it. All of these decisions from names to labels to style to even messaging in advertisements or merchandise and t-shirts basically just comes down to preference of the owner. And sometimes occasionally that will resonate with a particular market, but it's more likely that a lot of these moving parts aren't really communicating any specific thing. They're not all pulling in the same direction. So that's sort of one threshold. Is we're not really thinking about this overall brand story at all. We're just thinking about, oh, what do I prefer? Secondly, this might show up in some later questions too. Half of the challenge of this process is getting across a threshold of looking legitimate. So even beyond discussing preference, we are trying to create an impression that this is an organization that takes things really, really seriously. That doesn't mean that your labels or your packaging can't look homespun, because sometimes looking really homespun or handmade can be an important part of the brand. But it does need to instantly communicate to the customers that this is a serious operation. This is a serious organization who has taken the time to consider all of these aspects, and I know exactly what they're trying to communicate to me anytime I interact with this brand. This is what the brand means.
Yeah. When I worked in nonprofits, that's one thing I tried to explain to a lot of people a lot of times is, a brand isn't just your logo on a t-shirt. Your brand is how people feel about your product. And for us, it was a mission statement, right? So like everything encompasses into your brand. It's not just the image of what you see. So I 100% agree with that. Along those lines, when someone walks into a liquor store and sees hundreds of bottles, what's the first thing a brand has to communicate in the first 3 seconds to earn attention?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So it's a similar answer to what I just gave. That is that threshold of looking legitimate. Any product that looks like this was an afterthought, your eye just immediately glazes over it. And the next time you go to the grocery store, if you pay attention to this a little bit, unless you are hunting for a specific brand that you are already familiar with and you know that I want this thing, you notice that your eye is going to just pass over anything that looks like it was an afterthought. And it's because you're going to associate, if the company that put out this product, if this is an afterthought to them, they're probably not taking other stuff seriously as well. Now, that might not be a fair judgment, because you might have unbelievable liquid, and for one reason or another, you had to get something out to the shelf, and now it looks not really the way that you would love it to look. But unfortunately, that's the association that a customer who hasn't interacted with your brand before is going to make. So that number one mistake is just, we don't get over this first hurdle of looking like we're taking every aspect of our brand as seriously as we take the liquid.
So maybe we think an AI generated label.
I mean, I've seen, I don't know, we don't have to go down this whole rabbit hole, but it's becoming more and more common for me to receive initial concept art from quote unquote art from people who say, "Hey, I kind of like something like this. I used Midjourney or some other AI powered tool to create this concept." And you know what? We can absolutely take inspiration from that. Sometimes people can't sketch, and sometimes people have something in their head. They have a hard time getting it down to communicate, and those tools can do a good job of showing that. However, regardless of how it may look in a given uh, scene, what we need to make sure that we're doing is anything that we create is telling the same story again and again and again and again. And so we might use one of those tools to take inspiration from. But as of now, they're not able to take that and turn it into something that you can put on the shelf just yet.
Yeah, just a reminder, folks, if you've got questions, we're here to answer them. So go ahead and drop those in the chat, and I'll make sure to pop them up on the screen and get Josh's thoughts on them. So, one thing you mentioned was being an afterthought, and I think that plays an important part. So, craft distilleries, rightfully so, focus heavily on liquid quality first. At what point should branding and packaging enter the conversation? I know my answer, but you're more the professional, so I'll let you take it.
Sure. Well, generally, my answer to this is you can't really start too early. There are two reasons for it. One is kind of an operational reason. Getting your physical assets together, whether it is custom glass or labels or closures or merchandise or building a website that looks a particular way or producing a video that you want to do, whether it's cool lifestyle photography, you name it. Getting all of those things together just always takes longer than you think it does. And sometimes those things are going to be outside of your control. Like we ordered a shipment of glass and now the ship that is on is stuck or something. Sometimes it's outside of your control. And so what you want to do is begin developing all of those things as soon as you can. That's more of an operational nuts and bolts concern. But the other reason is that as soon as you begin thinking about these things and putting your strategy, your watchwords, this vision that you have for your brand down on paper, everybody on your team can start seeing where you're going. And whether it's somebody who's making social media content or somebody who is working with the label designer, or somebody who's just giving interviews or doing PR and talking about the brand, telling the same story again and again and again, the earlier that starts happening, it's going to be great for the customer, but it's also great for your team. We haven't really talked about internal communication. I know you mentioned mission statements, and there's a whole philosophy around getting your team on board with the mission, which we're not really going into today. But the same principle applies. That beginning earlier is going to help. I'm curious what your answer to this question was.
I mean, I think it should be right up there. I mean, I think before you even put anything in a still, I think you have to have it. For me, it's I don't think people start distilling and then decide that they want to build a brand and start bottling. So for me, when you're sitting down on that initial business plan and that idea, I think branding and packaging and having that conversation, I think for me should be one of the first three things that you do if you want to build a successful brand, is think about who you are, what your purpose is, and how you're going to convey that. That for me is a major step in building a brand, is having it there ready to go as you build, and not, like you said, making it an afterthought of, well, we've got it bottled, we've got it boxed, it's going to a distributor, what are we about, and things like that. So yeah, I think it should be one of the first things right after you get that recipe perfected. But that's just me.
Oh, I mean, I've worked with organizations that have they've been in the market for a while. I use Bearded Iris as an example. They've been in the market for a few years, and that it became clear to them that what they had built was not going to achieve the goals that they had for the brand. So we needed to, we took some inspiration from what they had already done, and the owners had an appreciation for the importance of this. And so they'd already been thinking about it, even if they weren't able to execute it, which is where we came along. And then once we executed those assets, and we've used them again and again and again for years and years now, they've achieved, a lot of success with that. Additionally, there are some older companies that I might call heritage brands that have some aspect of their brand that's really valuable because it is well recognized or well loved with their market. And this might be an illustration or a logo or an icon or a particular color or packaging design. It's possible that those just need a polish. We think about rebranding as nothing I'm doing is working. I'm going to do an entire 180. Well, maybe that is necessary every once in a while. But often there is something about an existing company that is important to preserve. And we just need to polish it, or maybe we're even telling the same story. We're just telling it in a more contemporary way, and we need some new materials to communicate that idea because for one reason or another. But doing some type of a brand evolution or a slight repositioning is something that we do as well.
And I don't have this one typed out, but since you mentioned like Bearded Iris, like how often should a distillery or a brand go back and kind of look at where their brand is, basically like a brand audit? Like how often should you go back and kind of reevaluate what you've done and where you need to be?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a really good question. 9 times out of 10, maybe even more than that, maybe 99 times out of 100, creative agencies, and myself included, get hired because there is some type of change. That could be a practical change, like there's new ownership. It could be a change like, oh, guess what? We have to change our name for some legal reason. But there's also changes like our products are not performing the way that we want them to. We have really ambitious goals. And we know that what we're doing now is not going to get us to the next level. We want to introduce a new line of products. We want to sell the same products to a totally different customer base. We want to sell a similar product, but at a totally different price point. We're breaking into a new market. All of these are change moments, and those are moments at which point it makes pretty good sense to do an audit. I think some of the other questions that we kicked around were things like, okay, let's say that we are going to do RTDs, which is yeah. I mean, we can go ahead and talk about RTDs since that's pretty similar.
I've got a question from Layla.
Sure.
She said, what strategies are you using in 2026 to differentiate your craft spirits brand in a crowded market? Are you focusing more on sustainability, direct-to-consumer subscription models, experiential marketing, or premium and limited release, and which has driven the best growth so far?
Man, that's a really great question. So I don't have a numerical answer where I can say this one particular tactic is the thing that has yielded X, Y, or Z, volume increase compared. Any of those things might be the right tactic for a given brand, depending on the story that they're trying to tell. There are success stories of companies who have, let's say, started RTDs that are entirely different brands from their core distillery brand. I've gotten the question, like, okay, should we keep our brand name if we are starting a whole new line of products? Generally, the way to think about that is if you expect to be selling to the same customers, then it often makes sense to keep that name and just have a new product offering, even if they're RTDs and they're a little bit different. If you expect to be selling to the same people who are buying your stuff now, then that can often make sense. If you're trying to capture an entirely new market or an entirely new group of customers, then having a separate brand name is often really useful. Additionally, it means that it's pretty easy to sell off one of the two. You don't have to it's a lot harder if they're all under the same brand name. But if you have these multiple brand names, you could sell one if you needed to for whatever reason. I don't have a to go back to the core question. I do not have a numerical answer to that. But for example, to go back to Bearded Iris, their strategy was premiumization from the jump. They charged more for a 16-ounce can than anybody else in their market, and they committed to that and basically wanted to present this as a premium version of a locally brewed craft beer, which is already more expensive than a domestic. I don't actually know that price point situation is still true today. Maybe other 16-ounce cans sell for exactly the same around the Nashville area, for example. But that was something that made absolute sense for the positioning of their brand at the time. With those given tactics, it would be figuring out what actually is consistent with the story with our brand that we're going to try to tell over time.
See, I've got another one here. Oh, Layla asked, are you using AR, QR driven label experiences to deepen brand storytelling now?
I have personally not done that. It's not something that's just been in our wheelhouse. But I know that there are brands that are. I think that would be something just as a specific tactic that might be cool to do some more research in. It's just not something I personally have experience with.
For distilleries that feel stuck, they have great products and limited market traction. What are the first signs that their shelf presence may be an issue?
Okay, that's a really good question. If you are doing more volume in your own gift shop than your retailers are, if people are coming in and talking about how much they like the product and then they buy a bottle, but it's not really moving on the retailer shelves, it's likely that you're just not interacting with enough new customers. You might just have some people who happen to love the liquid and they're loyal. It might also be cool to give them give those really loyal customers some more tools to spread the word. And that goes back to merchandise and other things like that. But if you are having that experience where the retailers are not keeping up with, your own gift shop, then that's a pretty good sign that there's something going on where people are just not, they're glazing over, kind of the way that we talked about earlier.
Question from Steven. For startup companies, how would you suggest to start the process for creating the brand and look?
Yeah, great question. So our process actually begins with a questionnaire. It's a pretty long document, and I do not expect companies that are just starting out to be able to answer every single question, and that's fine. That's not the point. The point is to begin thinking about all of these moving parts. If this is, and that questionnaire will often spark conversations just internally. I don't want to give the answer of, well, just hire me or hire somebody like me who's going to go through this process with you. But that is often where it starts. I found that clients who I really enjoy working with and who have a good amount of success tend to have a pretty good idea of what they are trying to build out of their business. Is this a brand that makes a single SKU and we just crush this one thing and everything else is just gravy? Or are we a or are we a company that really tries to drive demand for a lot of variety, small batch type of products? I know I'm kind of talking around your question because walking through a process like this with a pro is going to be super helpful.
I mean, you can hard sell. I wouldn't cut you off. But
I
appreciate it.
This is I'm trying to keep this whole thing from just becoming a commercial for me. Um, I'm trying to get like really useful information so you can get a little bit of behind the scenes. This is what it looks like to walk through this thing. But this is my own process. A lot of other creative agencies, they are probably going to hit a lot of the same steps, but they might use slightly different words. So again, to recap the very beginning, when you hear brand development, brand strategy, stuff like that, what you are trying to keep in mind is all of these small things that all have to be pointed in the same direction. It's kind of fancy language for just making sure you've got all of these ducks in a row. They all have to point the same way.
And I mean, I will say, I hope Punch Company joins us in ADI in Miami. We'll have some more consulting firms on the show floor, so you can always come down and shop around there as well. So I will hard sell a commercial for the ADI conference.
Well, I was at ADI a couple years ago, and it was really cool. I'm not going to be able to go this summer, so I don't want to get people's hopes up. We got some family stuff going on. Hopefully next year. Hopefully 2027.
Well, I appreciate you joining us now. Layla, thank you so much for the questions. How do you ensure brand consistency across physical packaging, digital presence, social media, and say distillery itself or tasting rooms? That's a good question.
Yeah, for sure. So as a nuts and bolts thing, having a really robust style guide is really helpful for that, because a good style guide is going to say, all right, when you are manufacturing plastic or metal or printing on different materials, these are the color values that we're going to use. Whenever you have a logo that needs to be reproduced in such and such a way, use such and such file. It's kind of a nuts and boltsy, just very practical concern. It helps to have somebody either in-house or a creative partner who has a good eye and a good attention to detail, so that they can look across these things, whether it's your social media, presence, whether it's some signage in your building or your merchandise or this packaging that you just talked about. Somebody who is really familiar with the brand, who can say, yeah, that looks consistent with this and this. But it also, you're just going to have people who are following these instructions and using the correct files. So, sometimes there's some kind of low-hanging fruits, some obvious stuff, like let's say you've got a logo that is always black on white, but whenever it goes onto metal, for example, if you use that particular logo file, it looks funky because it looks reversed. It almost looks like you did an X-ray, like the light colors are dark, etc. Well, working with a creative agency who's worth their salt, they're going to make sure that you've got every possible file type that you could need to execute across any of those things and have it not look like an accident and have it look consistent. Additionally, a lot of creative agencies, and us included, even though I'm not going to be managing your social media presence, it's really useful to have somebody in-house doing that. We can also just generate a bunch of templates that you can use and do variations on in-house. Unless you have just a really unbelievable budget, it's very difficult to hire a creative partner to manage your social media presence for you. I've not really seen it successfully done unless you just have an absurd budget to have a full-time team, at which point you might as well just bring them in-house, because it's not just about having stuff that looks cool. It's also about having somebody who can respond and be the personality of that brand online, especially if being very personality forward is part of your brand. So having real nuts and boltsy stuff, templates and files and such is going to go a long way towards helping with that. And then having a team member, whether it's somebody in-house or a creative partner who has that good attention to detail, can say, okay, this looks and feels consistent with what's going on across all of these different platforms.
Awesome. Since you mentioned social media, what are your thoughts? Again, I have my own as a former marketing director. Trend chasing. So, chasing down those viral trends. For me, it's not a good idea if the trend does not fit within your brand, and don't do something just for the sake of hoping it goes viral and gets you views, because it could be viewed as off brand, not not well placed? What are your thoughts on trend chasing?
If trend chasing is part of like your brand personality, like we always do the newest, coolest thing, I mean, maybe that's totally fine. For example, you know, for a long, so I'll just use the Bearded Iris example again. At the time, whenever we were working with them, it was pretty popular for these smaller, hipper independent breweries to, release a new IPA every 2 weeks, and they were always wild and very experimental flavor profiles is what was the trend. And that idea of experimentation was to a certain extent baked into the brand, so it made sense for them to do that, in addition to home style, which I guess you could say like paid the bills while they were doing all these other cool things, which gave them a lot of street cred. But that was because it made sense for the position as the brand. If there's some viral trend of a particular video, and it doesn't dovetail in any way, shape, or form with what you've already got going on, it's more than likely just a distraction.
Steven's got a follow up. What would be the initial thought process, and what are priorities are first, just to get off the jumping block? That goes back to his question about process for creating the brand and look.
Sure. So how about this? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give everybody a link to this brand questionnaire that I send out to new clients or potential clients, because thinking about the answers to those questions is going to get you halfway there to these things. I'm not going to say that if once you answer every single question that you're done, that you're ready to go. That's just the first step. But that's kind of what you're asking is, what is this first step here? Starting to identify the unique value proposition, thinking through our product strategy, thinking through some of our competition. I know we didn't talk about competition, but that's one of the steps in the brand strategy process is, who are our actual competitors? Are we competing in a really particular customer base who only ever buys bourbon, or they only ever shop for things that are manufactured in X, Y, or Z? And if we can get a really clear idea of who that customer is and this story that resonates with them, well, that's going to, get us a really long way down the road. But in addition to the case study PDF and the PDF of this presentation, I'll also just send over a PDF of the brand questionnaire. And even if we never work together, that's fine. This will just, thinking through those things will give you a leg up and start getting you down the road to this process.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll send that out with everything following this email, probably sometime this week, once we get it uploaded on YouTube. So thank you for offering to share that questionnaire to help people out. Let's see. Can you share an example of a brand that's incredible shelf presence and explain why it works so well from a consumer psychology standpoint? I know you've gone over a couple, but is there any extras or one that particularly stands out?
Yeah, so we talked about Tito's a little bit, and it feels a little bit unfair because they're just this kind of unicorn, this unbelievably successful. But I think about them not rarely because of how straightforward this is. I mean, we talked about this a minute ago. There's nothing enormously complex about this, right? It's so incredibly straightforward. The shape of the bottle is, I think it's just a generic bottle, whether it's this simple one or the jug. It's, might be the first bottle that you see, the first bottle shape you see in a catalog. The fonts on here might just be fonts that are available in like Microsoft Word or something. I don't know. It looks like somebody took the time to put the label together, but it's clearly not trying to be this enormously sophisticated, high-end luxury brand or something like that. It is communicating to the customer exactly what it is. And this goes along with the product name, Tito's. It's very approachable, very friendly. The fact that the product strategy itself, they only make one thing. There's not all of these flavors, right? They are making a single thing, and every aspect of their brand reinforces this. The price point reinforces it. The fact that the bottle looks like it was chosen from a generic catalog. There's no custom glass here. And I love custom glass. The price point on custom glass and the minimum orders have come down so much that it makes sense for a lot more distilleries to do custom glass than they think. But in this case, custom glass would actually, it might work against them. They're trying to communicate this really accessible, grab it, anytime, and it's very drinkable liquid, things like that. So all of these moving parts, you don't have to generate some enormously baroque, detailed, sophisticated label to be good or to be effective. That's obviously not the case. This is just an example that I think about kind of often because of how wildly successful they are and of how straightforward and simple their shelf presence is. And it's because it reinforces that same story, the fact that this is very clear, simple. We do one thing, we do it really well.
Yeah, and you can spot it behind a bar pretty easily if they have it not in the well. So I'd imagine I do see where that converts to the shelf as well. Steven said, thank you so much. Sounds like the business plan is the starting point in incorporating the imaging, branding, color scheme. Should that be incorporated as a starting point into the business plan?
In short, yes. I mean, we just use Tito's as an example. I expect in their business plan from day one, they said, we're going to make this one thing. We're going to make this one product. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they cooked up a dozen recipes at one point that eventually went by the wayside. I don't know that for a fact. But their business plan, at least now, is we do one thing, we don't deviate from it. We create this pretty high quality product, but we produce it at a very accessible price point. All of those are business plan decisions. And you could think about those things before you ever talk to somebody like me, but all of those decisions should absolutely inform someone like me. They should absolutely inform your creative direction. I mean, they're basically baked into your brand strategy. All of those things should work together. That's what I mean whenever I say you've got all of these moving parts, all point in the same direction. That includes your business plan. If you think, okay, we're going to do a line of RTDs now, thinking about which target customer is going to buy them. Is it somebody you already sell to, or is it a totally new group? That is a business plan decision. That's market research goes into that. And that is going to inform the creative. Do we need to cook up a new name? What does that name need to be? How associated is this with our existing brand, or not at all? So the short answer is yes.
Layla had another question. Man, Layla and Steven, you guys are carrying this conversation. So I appreciate the help. And I would have run through my questions really quick if it wasn't for you. So I appreciate it. How would you recommend marketing a brand that is opposite of Tito's? Think high-end luxury, distant, no social media presence, like Chanel instead of H&M.
So the question about how would we market it is going to be part of the overall brand strategy, not just, oh, well, let's market it where it says this is luxury and this is high-end. Actually, the way you choose to market it is it's kind of the medium is the message, right? And so trying to, that is probably a world, if you mean really, really, really high end, you're probably doing your best to do partnerships, because those types of products, the ones that have some type of celebrity or brand associated partnership, that really helps those types of products get off the ground. Now, we obviously want it to look absolutely killer. We almost want it to look like a lifestyle brand product. Name your celebrity. This is a person who would want to be seen holding or carrying this, or having this at a party. So the aesthetics, the creative aspect is obviously a part of it. But as a marketing effort, it's not as straightforward as, we need to buy some ads and we're going to put them on platform A instead of platform B because platform A is more high end. Yeah, that's part of it, but really we're talking big picture than that. you're probably going to try do your best to wrangle some type of partnership where you can borrow some of the cachet. That is a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about today, but whenever you're getting into the world of marketing, these things work together. But that's a sort of even a larger sphere than what we've addressed today.
Let's see. I'll try to finish up this. If anyone attending today walked away and did one thing this month to improve their shelf presence, what would you recommend they focus on first?
Sure. I would probably go to half a dozen of your retailers, maybe 3 of the worst performing ones and 3 of the best performing ones. Take your cell phone camera and walk around the aisles, get some snapshots of your own product on the shelves and the whole shelves, and see what the shopping experience is like with the products that are immediately around yours and the area. It's possible that some of those retailers are just really low volume, and it's not, maybe liquor's not their specialty or whatever. I don't know. For whatever reason, the purchasing experience there isn't really putting your brand in its best light. Maybe it's because the product actually does look pretty boring on the shelf, and there's nothing wrong with the shopping experience otherwise. It's just not something that my eye is going to be drawn to. Maybe it's because it looks like an afterthought, or it doesn't cross that threshold of looking legit. It looks relatively uninteresting in some way. Maybe it looks like a really solid design for a product that should be a lot cheaper than it is. So you've got that mismatch. We talked about the expectation, or vice versa. Maybe it's a product that's relatively low cost, but it looks like it would be really expensive. And so a budget shopper won't reach for it. Imagine if you went to that pasta aisle and you are not a high-end pasta sauce shopper, you're looking for a budget sauce. Well, there might be a cheap sauce that looks really fancy. You won't look at the number, though. You're going to see that this packaging looks really high-end, and you won't even reach for it, right? There's a mismatch there. So that's what I would do. I would go to those retail places, give a sincere effort about how does this look? What is the shopping experience like whenever I'm trying to figure out the shelf presence here? That's what I do.
Awesome. I think that's good advice. That's a good jumping off point. Are there any more questions for Joshua? I think we covered a lot of ground in the Q&A, so that's great. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Josh, thank you so much for joining ADI and sharing your experience and your expertise on this. I think a lot of people can take away from it. Again, if you're not a member of ADI, please consider being a member. Your support makes it possible for us to do these awesome webinars with thought leaders just like Joshua. So we try to do at least 2 a month, bring them to you guys for free. I hope to see a lot of you in Miami. August 18th and 19th is our annual conference. We'll be at the Miami Beach Convention Center, just a quarter mile from the water. It's going to be a great show, large show floor, a lot of great educational sessions. You can go to distilling.com, check out the schedule. We've got all of our speakers listed, a lot more great topics, just like what you guys heard here. If you're a member, be it free or premium, remember you get that discount. It's about $200 off your attendee ticket. So make sure free or premium, become a member and take advantage of that discount. And we'll be launching our hotel partners here shortly as well. So keep an eye out for that and be on our newsletter. Josh, thanks again. Have a great week. Thanks for everyone for joining us, and we will see you all at the next webinar. Bye.
Thank you very much for having me.